talk to you today, Marcello. You are the big dog at Manscaped, taking on the CMO role. Thank you for talking to me. It's awesome to have you on.
No, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I love talking about Manscaped, marketing, creative, so always a pleasure.
Yeah, I think, it's something that I learned through, looking at your background and when I, asked you to be on. I can't believe you started your career in politics. Is that right? And you helped get presidents elected. Was it seven or something crazy?
Yeah, it's been a little crazy. I haven't necessarily started there, but almost. So, and I'll try to give like a quick rundown. When I was like really young, about 8 years old, my mom and my dad were both running for office. My mom became like a congresswoman back in Brazil. My dad was the mayor of our town, which was a big town, like 2 million people. So it was kind of a big thing. But I didn't know neither at that time, of course, that neither politics or communication or marketing would be in my life. But later, when I started my actual career, I started on the creative side as an art director in an advertising agency. And I had the privilege of being part of a very competitive creative ecosystem, which Brazil was and still is. Like, Brazil is famous for delivering creative leaders that are all over the world. And we had a very competitive, we still have creative industry. So I started regular agency, but I always had a niche for getting more into the strategic side of things and understanding like what really drives, communication efficiency. And then in 2002, I was invited to lead creative for a presidential campaign. At the time, it was a very kind of inspiring and unique presidential campaign. It was actually our current president, Lula, was running for the fifth time. He had lost the previous four, and but this time the feeling was different. Like, Brazil was in a different mode, and it was very inspiring, and we ended up winning that campaign and helping elect him for the first time. And that was a really good learning experience. It's very intense. I got a chance to learn much more about like the strategic side of things, and also it's almost like a crash course in everything, from production to to delivering fast and effective creative, being able to do a lot with less, both money and time. I call it like, sometimes soccer players in Brazil, they when they have a game and they need to prepare, they go to a place of high altitude because the oxygen
Yeah.
everything is harder. So when you go back to like sea level, everything becomes easier. I like to say that the creative and political marketing and strategy is kind of like that. One, you have a very ambitious goal. So it doesn't help to get like 10, 15, 20% market share. You need to get like 50 plus one vote. So it's an ambitious goal. You have to do it in a short amount of time and with the whole population of a country as your audience, as your clients. So
Wow.
when you go back to the business world, to the brands, everything seems a little easier. So after that election, I actually went back to advertising. I was, running creative for some clients in Brazil, good clients, good brands. Really, really good time there. And then on 2010, I got invited again to do another presidential campaign. And then, long story short, from 2010 to 2014, I did another six presidential campaigns in five different countries. All together, with that first one, I had the luck of winning six out of the seven. But then I was done with it, and that's when I moved to the US in 2014. And since then, I haven't done much in that world, but I've applied a lot of the learnings on the brands that I've worked with, and especially now this last 5 years at Manscaped.
Wow. What a story. That's incredible. So you're telling me you're on easy mode now?
I mean, truthfully, yes, but it's very intense here and it's really cool. But, comparatively, I would say so still, like even in the hardest days.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like the 51% because I mean, it is how it works, but
Right.
when you have to win over such a majority, it's kind of crazy. Is that I know Manscaped from, the brand equity that you build over a long, long time, and like the lawnmower commercials when you release products and the creative, I think it like really filled a gap in the men's grooming market that like didn't quite exist. It was kind of like I would say, the expanded Dollar Shave Club era where men's grooming just wasn't that sexy. I guess, like, how did you come in contact with like Paul and the leadership there to, because your background is, it has gone into, I think you've worked in coffee. I know you've worked in consulting and a bunch of things. Like, how did that political pipeline
Yeah.
shift into now being CMO and, building amazing creative, doing amazing direct to consumer and omni-channel? How did that all kind of unfold?
Yeah, so when I moved to the US in 2014, I actually came here just to take a year off, like regroup with the family. I haven't, like I said, I've been working in those crazy campaigns in different countries, so I barely saw my daughters. I have two daughters and my wife. So it was kind of a regroup and let's come to California, some great sunshine and just take the time off. But then really quickly we all loved like being here, living here. So I decided to rebuild my professional life here. And it was hard in the beginning because first I started doing some consulting for brands here and I had amazing clients, but the pay was not there. Like Encinitas, where I live, is a small town. There's not a lot of brands around. Like remote wasn't as kind of accepted as it is today. So after a few months, I started to launch my own brands, and that's when I launched Mestizo, the coffee company. I launched a couple other brands, and one of them was a non-alcoholic beverage, like spirits brand called Drink Monday. And it was through Drink Monday, one of the partners in the brand that worked at Manscaped, connected me with Paul Tran. And it was interesting because at first when Paul and I met, like his first request to me was to come up with an icon for Manscaped. And I'm like, okay, it seems like a small job, but still interesting, good connection. I starting to love the story that he told me and the brand. And like on the second conversation, we both almost like looked at each other and said, like, who are we kidding, right? We want to get together and we have a lot more to do. So with that, I jumped on board. At first leading, everything that had creative on it. So it was branding, product design, packaging. By the way, when I came to the US to take a year off, I ended up going to product design school because I didn't want to just, stay at home. And I got a degree in product design here in the US. So when I joined Manscaped, I started leading creative, branding, product design, packaging, digital, everything that had creative on it. And in the very first like 6 months, we did a huge revamp of the brand, the packaging, even the design language for products. And we were both very happy. Both, I mean, myself, Paul, but the company and the results were starting to be very positive, and that's kind of what naturally led us to kind of put marketing and creative together. And then a couple of years later, I became CMO at Manscaped, which is my position now. But yeah, but it started with a very small request, but I refused to deliver on just a small request, and I made a whole assessment of the brand and where we should go and how the opportunities that we had in front of us. So that I think helped, I think, sell the vision and kind of establish that stronger relationship, which is always that it's something that I always tell, like when I talk to new creative people who are entering either marketing or the creative endeavors, and I think for like new professionals in general, I still believe that the secret to build like strong work relationships is it's to always over deliver. Like, make yourself critical, useful, fundamental. And the easiest way to do that is people ask you one thing, you do that, of course. You never fail to deliver on what you ask for, but do more. It's exciting and opens doors in my experience at least.
Yeah, that's great advice for anyone that's looking to excel, in this, I'll call, startup D2C brand world. You have to do a lot with a little, and so you
Yeah.
need to make a big impact. I do have some questions on that initial engagement because, like, I've been a customer from, honestly, like, probably, yeah, I don't know how long the company's been around, but I was like using the first iteration of the razor. I even had the stick one that you put the blade in, and like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so I've now kind of upgraded through the life cycle. So it's cool to chat with you. But he had, Paul had built quite a good brand. Like, in that assessment that you said, you had one scope, the elevated bit, like, can you break down what you thought wasn't being kind of touched on.
Yes.
Yeah, as a customer, I was like, cool. They're pretty funny. They're like, making satirical stuff. What changed?
Yeah. So and that's a great question. And like when I first met Paul Tran, our CEO, and when I joined Manscaped, they already have like an amazing proposal, right? So they had like the foundation was there, and it was really solid, and it was very exciting. What I saw as like a huge opportunity to step up was more on the quality of the execution of a few things. So as of course it's natural to a startup, to a company who's growing fast, that's growing fast, they were focusing on the core. But I thought that there was a lot of touch points that we could deliver more, and it would be like highly perceived by the consumer. And it was, Paul said something that at the first time he said, I was a little skeptical, but then I quickly realized that it was a true superpower for Manscaped, was this combination of humor and quality. In a lot of places and brands, they usually go for one or the other. Like we tend to think that the authenticity and the kind of expressive and loose manners of humor are not compatible with like the precision and the high attention to details that quality demands. And I think that that's one of the superpowers of Manscaped. Like in the right channels, in the right conversations, we have this very kind of almost like, borderline naive and authentic conversations.
Yeah.
But then when you go to packaging, to product design, to our website experience, everything is kind of perfectly crafted, and we pay a lot of attention to the details. And I think that combination is really powerful and pays off, because I think when we compete with legacy brands that
Hmm.
may be perceived as good quality, but they're boring because they are so technical and they're so focused on that tech specs and that kind of precision components. And then on the other hand, sometimes you have a lot of like newcomers, or even in our case, a lot of copycats on the growing side, that they can mimic the humor and they can try to be funny, but then it's hard to deliver on the quality, right? So that became like a very powerful binomial, like this humor and quality component. And I think what I was able to bring to the table quickly was like elevating that quality side. The humor was there, the humor and the strong proposal. The product was created, right? Paul already had like that moment of genius and brilliance. I was only like happy to capture the opportunity and just kind of just help evolve it, but everything was there. Another thing that I think was always like really interesting for Manscaped is when I talk about the humor component. I think there's two things about Manscaped that makes it very unique. One was when Paul looked at brands that claim to be serving men in the grooming space, they all skipped one very fundamental part of the male experience, which is, one of the parts that men have that is different than the rest of the population. I don't know, they were shy to talk about the groin, they could not talk about balls. And I think his realization was, how can you say that you are dedicated to men and you skip one of the tricky and fundamental parts of what anatomically being a man also represents. So tackling that first, I think was a very very strong move. And then I think the humor came as almost like a natural necessity, right? Because to talk about balls and people still have some sensitivities around it, humor was the best tool to kind of put the fences down and have those honest conversations in a lighthearted way that people could listen, people could open up to the conversation. And I think that's still like another of what we call internally here our superpowers, is like facilitating hard conversations.
Yeah.
And even now, when we are launching the Send Face Pics Instead campaign, which is to promote our products for the face, like the beard trimmer, the face shavers, and all that, we made this very deliberate decision to let's use our superpowers for good, and let's facilitate a conversation on a topic that it's from a certain perspective, a kind of an epidemic that we believe men can do better, and we also believe it's better for them, because one of the findings as we were developing this Send Face Pics Instead campaign was that sending face pics instead of pictures of your private parts is scientifically proven to be 9 times more effective if
Yeah.
your goal is to engage on a conversation or attract a partner.
Yeah.
So
Can you
it's
that to my
it's good
friend?
for everyone.
Can you tell my
I'm
friend
sorry.
that? Nah, can you tell my friends that?
Yeah, sure.
That's incredible. I love it. I think that's like getting the next level of, the why, and the why is so important, especially when you are combining creative and quality. And so, like, you guys, when I say you guys, Manscaped started as D2C, and Omni-Channel I know is now a part of like a deeper strategy to reach more audiences. Is that saturation driven? Is that brand maturity? Because like it's easy to craft that a hard conversation when you own the channel. How do you think about owning that conversation through, arm's length, partners, for lack of a better term? How do you think about that?
Now that's a very rich question because one, I think it is part of the business evolution, right? To become omni-channel. One of the first things that I did when I got the job of CMO at Manscaped was a really deep dive on the D2C dynamics and the D2C phenomenon because we sometimes fail to remember how recent direct to consumer and e-commerce is in the large scale of things, right? It's a 12, 13, 14-year phenomena. So there's a lot to learn still. There's a lot that's still like being designed, right? It's not something that you can look at history and say, hey, this is how this thing works. But one of the things that I found out was that it is a model that it's perfect for breakthrough, perfect for smaller companies like early Manscaped to show up in the same quality with a very highly crafted, good proposals to consumers
Hmm.
at par with brands with deep pockets because on the digital world, you can show up, with your best and you can look best than companies that can have way more resources than you have, which before that was very hard because to be at a Walmart or a Target, you would have to have like, the business needed to exist and to be proven. And as a startup, you don't have it, right? So D2C is perfect for that. And it is an amazing tool for the brands to show up, directly in their true selves. But it's also a very hard channel to scale, at least to the level of our ambitions at Manscaped. Because there's almost like a logical it's what I call like the opposites of economies of scale because digital, especially performance to DTC, let's focus on that for a little bit. That binomial, that combination, which is so much used for companies to break through, they use the tools and the algorithms that were designed to put your ad in front of the most likely to convert person, right? So to get like that very bottom of the funnel, the people who are ready to make a choice. And it's just as like natural logic, as you go to the second sale, the third sale, the 200,000 sale, it's capturing for people who are less likely to convert, who was like not as close to that moment of making a purchase as the first one. So as you scale, things just become harder and harder and harder, and everything becomes more expensive, right? And it's very easy to get hooked on that performance to D2C combination because you can measure and you can see results and then start forgetting how it can become quickly unprofitable for the business in the long run. So I believe that it's a natural transition. Every case study that I looked into like dozens of companies reports, like, and I could even detect like a pattern. They usually like the companies who start strong on the D2C performance space, they cap at a certain level and they have a hard time breaking through. We, on the other hand, first, I think Paul Trent had the vision of being omni-channel since the beginning. So although of course performance and D2C were really strong in our early years, we already had like a foot on retail. We had a strong presence on Amazon. So right now, I think it's just fast tracking and pushing harder on that transition.
Mm.
And that's kind of what one of my tasks currently at Manscaped is like lead that change because it changes the way we do marketing for sure.
Yeah.
It changes our internal culture, which I believe it's one of the hardest aspects of it because we were so successful in the model that we had that it's very difficult sometimes to embrace the change and to kind of embrace the risk of kind of new way of doing things. Yes, I think it's natural for any business that has an ambition to grow beyond what I believe uh, a D2C centric or D2C focused system can deliver, especially in our space.
Yeah, how do you, that's interesting. I think that's meeting shoppers when they have intent and different things is a way to do it. You know, when you're shopping and you're at the supermarket aisle and you can go and get everything at once, you have to show up there, otherwise you're going to be forgotten. So I think if that's at a certain scale point, you have to meet the customers where they want to be met. Big believer in
Yeah.
that omni-channel strategy. How do
And
you,
our data shows that the vast majority of our consumers are still shopping on mass retail. The direct to consumer is comparatively a smaller portion. And there is another thing that you touched on and you asked before was how do you manage like the different tone of voice, right? Because what I can say on my website is different than what I can put in the aisle of Walmart and Target and Best Buy and the other amazing partners we have at retail. And yes, that is kind of an adaptation that we need to go through. The good thing is all of our retail partners, I believe that they reached out to us because they love what they saw, right? So we did not have to transform who we are. We just have to show up sometimes in a more family friendly way on that space specifically. But outside of that, we keep being who we are. We
yeah,
try to bring as much as the foundations of that humor to an in-store experience. But yes, of course, with, being more careful that you are showing up to a wider audience that might not have chosen to click on your website and like read everything you have to say with your own words in that more kind of out there humor that we can do. So it is something that we need to pay attention to. It is something that requires learnings and kind of adaptation, but it doesn't change who we are. That's the most important thing, right? We don't need to pretend to be another brand.
mhm,
Otherwise, we would become boring as the brands they had before. So, you
yeah.
know,
Does that
why do we have us there, right?
Yeah, does that change the way you think about how you reach people, which is like more like, performance marketing? That is like D2C to its core, which is around essentially like CPAs and actually converting and what's the CAC and how you're managing, I'll call these metrics that are like very measured. Like I know you're on like Seth Meyers that you guys got organically brought up. Does PR become a bigger part of reach because you said like coming up in a family friendly way in Best Buy and Target and all these great partners, but they already know who you are. I already know who you are. And is that just an extension? Is that now actually amplifying that message? Is that been a switch in the last few years to
Yeah.
um, capture eyeballs and then funnel it into a different kind of metric set?
Yeah, I think there are huge changes, right? There's a change on the kind of consumer that you're talking to. Like usually when you're selling direct to consumer, the bulk of that audience is very invested in the space, being that male grooming or being that trimmers or being manscaped are invested enough to navigate to a manufacturer's website, and kind of see what we have to offer and all that. When you grow and you want to scale, you need to talk to a consumer that was way less invested. Sometimes, they're just walking to a store aisle on an idle Tuesday. They are bored and they see us. They remember what they saw. They think we are funny and with a good quality, and they go for it, right? So it's a relationship that's way kind of less deep and intense, but that's where you scale. And we need to get good at this because it's very easy to fall in love with your hardcore fan base that goes to your website and discusses, all your product aspects and all that. And of course, although this is the people that will keep close to us because there's a lot of value in that exchange, we need to be very good at talking to a much wider audience. And I think that's where the political
Yeah.
campaign comes in handy because that's where I had to do, talking to a whole population. And the other thing to your point is shifting the way we look at metrics. Like I mentioned before, it's very easy to get hooked on the CAC metric and like that quick turnaround and being very precise. Whereas when you go to upper funnel marketing, which is what we do more now, and omni-channel marketing, a lot of times like the cycles are longer, the
Yeah.
metrics are less accurate and less immediate, right? So there's a whole kind of education of not only, us as a brand and professionals working in marketing, but kind of, yes, changing the way we measure things and the way that we see success. One analogy that I use is, when you are on the performance to D2C kind of core space, it's like you're driving this car that tells you at every second how many miles per gallon it's making, right?
Yep.
And you get so hooked on the measurement because it's cool that it's measuring that you forget to look how much of a gas guzzler that is. And then on the other hand, you have this other car that doesn't give that measure. It will only let you know how much you spend and how much you ran when you go to the gas station at the end of this 2 weeks. But you can sense and you end up knowing later for a fact that it has a much better mileage than that one that was giving that immediate read. So it's kind of shifting our mindset to be open to, yes, I'm going to learn later, but I have all the indications that I need right now to tell me that this is a much more efficient marketing strategy than, just being hooked at the measurement. And although it seems like obvious and logical, I lost count of like how many people and companies and people that I talk to and other D2C businesses, how that it's hard to change, because in the end, we are humans, we have our behaviors and, we get used to things and that comes in, that, makes a difference.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's insightful. I know we're kind of coming up on time. I guess I have one very last question that is maybe a little personal or not, but I'd like to ask like if there was a mistake or something that surprised you that you didn't think would work, or you took that kind of like, fly ball experiment that just like, did more than you thought. I'm curious if you've had any ones that kind of jump out to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna call a unique one because one, my memory is not that great, and two, I don't want to be unfair to the other ones. But what I'll tell you is, I learn every day at the job, right? And one of the things, when you ask about things that surprise me or that seem like a mistake or things like that, is when we exercise our humor. Sometimes the team comes with something that I'm like, man, this is this is way too much. And I feel like I'm about to veto it, but then, I stop for a second and say, hey, I think it's always important to hear your team and hear other people and hear other perspectives, especially as we tend to have a younger audience than myself, right? So why should I be that measure? So in those cases, a lot of times I come to my daughters. I have two daughters. They are now 19 and 21. So they are more in that core audience, and I show them and they're like, oh, this is super cool, and I'm like, okay, let's do it then. I mean, of course, it's not like how they are approving that, but they are at least making me as the CMO more comfortable with the message and how it resonates with the audience. I got surprised a lot by the differences in generations, but that for me is one of the things that I love about the job, is kind of learning and being open to the different audiences and how it resonates with different people, which it's always needed. I think for people in marketing and creative, one of the things that you need to develop from a very early stage is this ability to put yourself in other person's and reality's shoes. And I'm usually good at that. Sometimes there's like those special moments where I'm like, I need a double check, but
I love that. That's a very manscaped answer as well, where you guys definitely push the risque, which is again your superpower. So thank you for coming and talking to me. It's been
thank you.
like you're an absolute weapon. I love what you're working on, and we didn't even get to talk about all the cool art in your background. It's like obviously creative is core to you. So thank you again, Marcello. It's awesome.
No, thank you. I love, like I said, I love talking about this. So I'm here anytime. I can go for hours. But thank you. It was good. It was good to be
Yeah,
here. Thanks for the invite.
cool. I want to hit stop, but